Very proud to welcome back this video sponsor, Lost in Cult. They got such a massive response from shouting out their Outer Wilds collection a little while ago that they wanted to do it again with two incredible new offerings. The first is a 270-page book detailing the rich history of the original Dead Space, and the second is a vinyl box set celebrating the work of Enhance, responsible for over a decade's worth of classics from Res Infinite through to Tetris Effect Connected and more. They are both rare, special collector's items you can't get anywhere else, and you can get a discount on them when you use offer code SKILLUP at checkout. More details after the video. Gamers, man, Ubisoft cannot catch a break, can they? I'm referring, of course, to the biggest news of the week, and that's the sudden announcement that Ubisoft are shutting down XDefiant, an announcement that comes just 6 months after the game officially launched. If you've never heard of XDefiant before, it probably means you don't play Call of Duty, because Lord knows that XDefiant was laser focused on pulling over as much of the COD community as humanly possible. It was essentially positioning itself as a free-to-play COD alternative, though with more of a focus on character kits and team play, similar to like Black Ops 4 or whatever. The big pitch, though, was no skill-based matchmaking, a back-end setting that would always try to match you with players of equal skill. A good idea in theory and in practice, but there's always been a very loud segment of the community, mainly the sweats, who absolutely despise this matchmaking method because they accurately claim that it made every game very demanding, which is exactly what happens when a bunch of high-skilled players have to play together. But the byproduct of that is that low-skilled gamer dads with their 3 wives and their 8 full-time jobs, they get to play with people at their level rather than getting dunked on repeatedly in the 16 spare seconds they have each week to play video games. The XDefiant dream came crashing down yesterday as Ubisoft posted an announcement that said, in part, quote, "Today Ubisoft announced that it will discontinue development on XDefiant, its free-to-play first-person shooter title. As a result, half of the XDefiant team worldwide will be transitioning to roles within Ubisoft. The decision also leads to the closing of our San Francisco and Osaka production studios and the ramp down of our Sydney production site, with 143 people departing in San Francisco and 134 people likely to depart in Osaka and Sydney," end quote. Now, to be clear, that is 277 roles, which is not insignificant. That's 277 people with, families and mortgages and dogs and probably very expensive Warhammer 40k habits. Yesterday, these people had jobs, and today they do not, and that is ultimately the most important and most disappointing aspect of any game cancellation like this. As for why it went down the way it did, here's what Ubisoft had to say, quote, "Despite an encouraging start, the team's passionate work and a committed fan base, we've not been able to attract and retain enough players in the long run to compete at the level we aim for in the very demanding free-to-play FPS market. As a result, the game is too far away from reaching the results required to enable further significant investment, and we are announcing that we will be sunsetting it," end quote. And look, that wasn't PR spin because, XDefiant fundamentally was a pretty decent video game. Even those who didn't like it or preferred COD or just had no interest in suiting up for yet another competitive multiplayer experience, they all agreed that this was, at a foundational level, not half bad. Gunplay was solid, maps were good, class kits were interesting, if a little wonky. It definitely had some technical issues to work through, some of which played the game both pre and post-launch. Fundamentally, it was a good but not great video game, and its sudden demise is not explainable by a lack of quality. If this sounds a little familiar, it's because it's a tale that at least partly mirrors that of Concord, the single biggest and fastest flop in live service history. That also was a pretty decent game, and I know not everyone agrees with that, but certainly from my perspective, its foundational elements were solid, and had the character designs, maps, and game modes been improved over time, you could have had yourself an interesting shooter, but the road to get to that point would have been quite long, and Sony did not have the stomach for that sort of investment, which is why Concord lasted just a few short weeks. A similar thing here with XDefiant, where you could imagine that if Ubisoft had poured huge amounts of money into it over a long-ass time, it might have found the footing it needed to become self-sustaining, but the elephant in the room, of course, is that you're going toe-to-toe with Call of Duty in a year when Activision just so happened to make a really good Call of Duty, one that is also available on Game Pass. So, how do you compete with that? Evidently, you don't, and I think this will be the last time any major publisher tries this. You'll still see indie shooters like BattleBit Remastered or AA offerings like Splitgate 2, but don't expect any of the big dogs to make the same mistake that Ubisoft just made. In terms of nuts and bolts, Ubisoft are refunding anyone who bought the Ultimate Founders Pack, as well as any DLC purchases made after November 3rd of this year, so that's good. But if you bought anything else outside of that grace period, then you're fresh out of luck. Contact your bank maybe, see if they'll help you out. Ubisoft have stopped all new sign-ups and all new downloads, that the promised Season 3 content will be delivered as promised. The game will then go offline entirely on June 3rd of next year, year, yet another example of a game that a bunch of people spent many years building, rendered completely unplayable and lost to time because our industry makes no effort to protect video games from permanent deletion. This really caps off an absolutely disastrous year for Ubisoft. In December of last year, they had that Avatar game, and when's the last time you heard anyone mention that? They opened 2024 with Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, which was a fantastic game that unfortunately undersold, and so now the team is working on something else rather than a follow-up sequel. Skull and Bones, oh man, a game they spent 11 years making and it ends up being worse than the game that inspired it. Rogue Prince of Persia was another Prince of Persia game released this year. It's promising in early access, but it's unlikely to ever shift the sorts of numbers that Ubisoft need to arrest their decline. Beyond Good and Evil 20th Anniversary Edition released in June, reminding us that Beyond Good and Evil 2 is literally the longest in development video game in the history of video games, and there's no sign it's coming anytime soon. Star Wars Outlaws arrived to a very middling reception, and it sold so poorly that it prompted Ubisoft's board to announce a company-wide investigation and transformation focused on player centricity. This was also the same week that Ubisoft announced that their marquee release of 2024, AC Shadows, would be delayed into 2025, and at this point, it's really tough to find much hype or excitement for that game. To top all of that off, Ubisoft released an honest-to-goodness, genuine, hand-to-God NFT game in 2024. It's called, I don't know, something so generic and loathsome that my brain immediately black-holed it as soon as I heard it. So to have that sort of year and cap it off with an announcement like this, it's going to be a rough round of bonuses for the executives this year, right? Who am I kidding? The bonuses will continue to flow, and sadly, so too will the layoffs. Changing gears now, while everyone is laser focused on answering the question, can a DLC win Game of the Year? Miyazaki seems unfazed. Right now, his attention remains fixed on future projects, and we know at least one thing he's definitely not making: Elden Ring 2. This week, Miyazaki was chatting with Japanese publication Game Watch, and here's what he had to say when questioned about the possibility of an Elden Ring sequel. Quote, "At this point, we are not considering development such as Elden Ring 2, however, this does not mean we are denying the development of the IP Elden Ring. As for what will we do then, From Software is running multiple projects as usual. Among them, there are various variations of projects, so I hope you will look forward to them." End quote. He didn't say it aloud, but I'm pretty sure I know exactly what he means when he mentions development of the Elden Ring IP, so get ready for Battle Royale Elden Ring, featuring gacha mechanics, of course. No, but seriously, we know that there are already a number of Elden Ring IP plays floating around, including, unironically, a potential mobile port or spin-off, as well as various transmedia projects like a TV show, film, or anime. Elden Ring is simply too popular to not expand further, but then again, exactly the same thing could be said of Bloodborne, so who knows what FromSoft are thinking. Hey, speaking of big IP, did you guys see that Sony just revealed a brand new game in the smashingly successful Horizon series from Guerrilla Games and Sony Interactive? Sony didn't even tease this one, we had no idea it was coming, and all of a sudden, boom, new Horizon game. How cool is that? Oh, what's that? This isn't Horizon, but rather a Tencent made knockoff that is a shameless copy and paste of the visuals, so much so that it would put Palworld to shame. That's right, believe it or not, this is not a new Horizon game, but a game called Light of Motorum, which is basically Tencent thinking to themselves, well, if Palworld can beat Nintendo's lawyers, then surely we can beat Sony's. Developed by the Tencent-owned studio Polaris Quest, it's what you see, a game set in a world that is heavily inspired by Horizon Zero Dawn, a lush green post-apocalypse where mechanical beasts and animals roam the earth, and humans have resorted to a more tribal way of life to get by and survive. Now, while it looks like Horizon, they released a 16-minute gameplay demo shortly after the game reveal, which shows that Light of Motorum plays very differently to Horizon. It is actually an open-world, co-op survival, crafting and building game, because, again, it worked for Palworld. The combat also looks a little Souls-inspired, because of course it does, and you also have the ability to recruit and summon the robot animals for use in fights. So what does PlayStation think about all this? I mean, they must be okay with it, because the official PlayStation social accounts in China helped announce this thing and confirmed it was coming to PS5 as well as PC and iOS. No date for this, but yes, it is going to be free to play when it does arrive. So far, people are calling it Horizon Zero Originality and Horizon Zero Shame, and that is, of course, very funny. But damn, you gotta admit, these knockoffs are getting pretty ambitious these days. Here's a sad story about a delisting that sorta has a happy ending, but no thanks to Blizzard. So remember how Blizzard released those questionable-looking remasters of Warcraft 1 and 2 a couple of weeks back? Well, unsurprisingly, they're pulling the DRM-free versions down from goodoldgames.com. However, GOG is not taking this lying down. They announced that even though they won't be allowed to sell this version anymore, they've committed to maintaining it and making sure it will continue to run and play well for the foreseeable future. This is part of their GOG preservation program they recently announced, where they wanted to commit to maintaining a curated catalog of all-time classics indefinitely. In a statement, GOG said this, quote, "Going forward, even if a game is no longer available for sale on GOG, as part of the GOG preservation program, it will continue to be maintained and updated by us, ensuring it remains compatible with modern and future systems. We're incredibly proud of our work with both Warcraft, Orcs and Humans and Warcraft 2, bringing them back to life after decades of unavailability and introducing several improvements to ensure the best possible experience as close to the original as possible. Although we'll no longer be able to offer these games in our store, anyone who purchased them before they were removed will still be able to enjoy the most compatible, high-quality versions guaranteed by the GOG preservation program," end quote. Important to note that GOG games are DRM-free, which means that in future, the only way that people will be able to get a compatible version of these old games is to pirate it, because they won't be able to buy it by any legal means. So it's like a case of Blizzard being willing to bite off their nose to spite their face. It's Blizzard executives once again proving that they have absolutely no love or respect for the games that made the studio what it is today, or for the consumers who want to continue playing those games, or for the broader goal of preserving some of the most important releases in the history of this art form. Honestly, the work GOG is doing is incredibly valuable, and we're very lucky to have them in our corner. And finally, some bittersweet news about an industry giant. Shuhei Yoshida is leaving Sony in January of next year. Yoshida was one of the PlayStation OGs, working alongside Ken Kutaragi when PlayStation was just a tiny division of around 100 people inside Sony, and Sony didn't even want to put their name on the box because they were low-key ashamed of it. Yoshida was most known for being the president of Worldwide Studios from 2008 to 2019, an absolute golden era for PlayStation as it clawed its way back from the failed launch of the PS3 into a PS4 launch that was so decisively successful that Xbox boss Phil Spencer would later go on to declare the battle permanently lost in that moment. After Yoshida stepped down from that role in 2019, he's been focused on nurturing indie projects, a role he's taken to with gusto, and a space he hopes to continue operating in after he leaves Sony. Separate from all of this, Yoshida is just a fucking cool dude apparently, and absolutely everyone in this industry loves him. We all chat behind the scenes, there's always plenty of gossip about this person or that, but no word of a lie, I've never heard a bad word about Yoshida, and I'd be surprised if anyone's ever said one. The indie scene in particular really loves him because they can see he has such a genuine love for the creativity that can still exist in that space, where the AAA space demands so much more rigidity and homogeneity. Anyway, Shu, thank you for your service, sir, and we very much wish you the best for this next chapter. A quick lightning round to finish off. Dan Houser was one of the co-founders of Rockstar, but he left a number of years ago to start a whole new studio called Absurd Ventures. They're not working on games alone though, they're doing a whole transmedia push for whatever new IP they're building. We don't know what that IP is yet, but Smilegate, the developers and publishers behind Lost Ark, do. And they like it so much that they invested a bunch of money into Dan's studio. The partnership is described as one aiming to share expertise across Western and Asian markets, so it's likely Dan's looking to make sure his new project is able to break into international markets. We'll let you know when more details about this one begin to surface. Digital Foundry have corroborated the recent round of reporting about a PlayStation handheld. Speaking during one of their podcasts, here's what they had to say, quote, "What's interesting about this is we actually heard about this handheld some months ago from a couple of sources. Specifically, we're not in the business of leaking things, but it's interesting that this has finally sort of started to make its rounds because it just sort of confirmed what we had seen and heard off the record about this existing, which is cool. This sort of just strengthens the notion that, yeah, they're very much working on something, and this article makes it seem like it's even further out than I actually thought based on that, so I'm not sure where it's going. I think there's like prototype stuff out there possibly. There's still a lot of questions for this, but it does feel like this future of offering a handheld and a home console option is very likely at this point," end quote. Microsoft's efforts to shoulder barge their way into the mobile storefront space has hit yet another snag. They had plans to roll out a storefront app this week onto the Google Play Store, one that would allow people to buy and play games from the app, bypassing the 30% revenue cut that Google demand. Google sought a court order to stop the app from rolling out, and the court agreed, leading Xbox's Sarah Bond to announce a delay of the rollout, and Tim Sweeney to tweet about how much he hates Google, which is like his favorite pastime. Quote, "Google's statement is deceitful. Shame on them. They well know that the 30% cut they demanded is far more than all the profit from game streaming. They know this because they blew hundreds of millions of dollars building the failed Stadia game business themselves," end quote. Ooh, be sure to put some ice on that burn, Google. Some quick sales numbers to top you off. Gary's Mod just hit 25 million units. Not bad for a game the creator was originally planning on giving away for free. At the other end of the value spectrum is Star Citizen, which just surpassed $750 million in crowdfunding and is still absolutely nowhere near release. Chris Roberts is either headed to the Game Awards to collect a Game of the Year trophy, or to one of those fancy white-collar prisons. There is no in between. Dave the Diver has sold through 5 million copies. You absolutely love to see it. Just like you love to see Balatro cleaning up on mobile, where it apparently has made over $4.4 million in revenue. Not bad for a dude, an Excel spreadsheet, and a bunch of if statements. That Pokemon TCG mobile game has apparently made over $200 million in its first month, because of course it has, and Fortnite just passed its highest concurrent player count ever. 14 million people were logged in at the same time to watch the Remix, the finale event featuring Eminem, Ice Spice, Juice WRLD, and Snoop Dogg. 14 million people, that's literally 20,000 Concords, just in case you were wondering. Concord. It is to player counts what the Scaramucci is to time, a very valuable metric that we will not soon forget. So what got announced or delayed this week? Well man, I thought last week was pretty light, but this week, Jeff, could you please stop holding every game developer and publisher hostage? It's not just the Game Awards, mind you. It's also the other smaller showcases around the Game Awards too, all of them thinking it's a great idea to blast out every announcement at the same time. There were a few announcements this week though. Palworld, for example, they announced a bunch of updates as they continue to handle the whole being sued by Nintendo who wants to shut them down completely for patent infringement thing. They announced the game would be getting a big new island as part of its December update, and it's the biggest island to date, about 6 times bigger than the last one. The other biggish announcement is that Palworld is partnering up with sandbox great Terraria on some kind of collaboration. No details beyond some art at this point, so stay tuned for more details later on. Star Wars Hunters is that team-based arena shooter that Zynga was making for what seemed like forever and finally released on iOS and Switch in June of this year. Surprisingly, it's actually meant to be pretty okay, and now they've announced the game will be coming to Steam on the 27th of January with playtests currently happening. Hey, did you catch the Devolver Delayed showcase last week? Because if you didn't, you missed out on some of the most elaborate delay announcements people have ever thrown money at. The indie publisher delayed 3 of their upcoming games to 2025, and honestly, these announcements were kind of bummers because these games all look really good. The first one is Baby Steps, the next game from Bennett Foddy, who is known for his exceedingly frustrating movement games like Quap, Gurp, and Bennett Foddy's Getting Over It. Also, did you know he was in the synth pop band Cut Copy? A little bit of trivia for you Australians out there. Anyway, this one's made in collaboration with the duo that made the excellent jazz rampage game Ape Out, and it involves you playing an unemployed man, making him slowly walk by controlling each of his limbs in like a fully simulated physics-based thing. Kind of like Death Stranding, but somehow more sad. The second delay announcement from Devolver was Skate Story, which is the incredible looking skateboarding game where you play a demon made of glass and pain skating through hell. And yes, you will smash into 1,000 pieces every time you stack. This thing looks and sounds amazing. It's got a very cool and psychedelic soundtrack, and not to spoil anything, but I may have a thing or two to say about this one very soon. The last Devolver game to get delayed was Stick It to the Stickman, which is the next title from the gang at Free Lives, who made Broforce and Angerfoot and weirdly Terra Nil, which is, you know, very, very different. This one's a satirical roguelike brawler that involves you climbing literal corporate ladders as you fight your way to the top of the chain. It's got goofy, physics-based combat and an emphasis on hijinks and humor. There's a demo for this one out right now, and it's a really good time. All of these games from Devolver will be out sometime in 2025. Hopefully. One delisting this week, but it's not one you should be too worried about. Triangle Strategy, which is the excellent 2D, 3D tactical RPG from Square Enix, has been removed from the Nintendo eShop. Square says it's temporary, and chances are they're doing something to swap over the publisher licenses to this one before re-releasing it. Nintendo actually handled the international release for this one like they did for Octopath Traveler before it. Chances are with Square Enix's new multi-platform focus to make the big bucks, this will be announced for PC and other consoles soon-ish, but right now it's a MetaQuest exclusive, with that VR version arriving just a few short weeks ago. A very weird situation, but no doubt one that'll be fixed up pretty soon. Alright, so what came out last week? New Arc Line is that Arcanum-inspired RPG that mixes magic and steampunk, and it launched into early access with a small fraction of its overall content, similar to how Baldur's Gate 3 released into early access. Only about 200 reviews in at the time of writing, but it is sitting at a very positive rating. People seem to love the art direction so far and really see the promise, but they are flagging that there are plenty of bugs and the classes are quite limited. Nicholas Hawke on Steam has just over 10 hours on this one, and here's what they had to say, quote, "Very fun steampunk world, probably one of the steampunkiest games I've seen. Kind of feels like Arcanum and Baldur's Gate 3 had a baby. The combat seems like a simplified version of Baldur's Gate 3, but as you get more gear that has new abilities, I think the tactic aspect really starts to take off," end quote. So yeah, a promising start, definitely one to keep an eye on as it goes down the track. Another shout out to Nine Souls, which is one of the many 2D Metroidvanias that released release this year. This one was made by Taiwanese horror developer Red Thread Game and came out on consoles last week. A few new reviews all sitting in the 8 and 9 camps, and it hasn't shifted the game's mighty 85 on OpenCritic too much. Here's a new review from Slant explaining why this game is so damn good. Quote, combat in the vein of Sekiro generates an entrancing sense of rhythm with its emphasis on parries and explosive counterattacks. Defeating Nine Souls' riveting, punishing bosses demands that you see battle through Yi's perspective as both an art and a science. You must study your foes, internalize subtle cues in their movements, fend off blows with lightning precision, and capitalize on even their briefest missteps. There are a handful of frustrations, but they wither before the thrills of Yi's rousing duels, end quote. They gave it 4 out of 5 stars, not bad. Neon Blood was that very cool looking cyberpunk adventure RPG that came out on all platforms last week. Unfortunately, it seems like the looks are the best thing about it, with a fair OpenCritic score of 66 and mixed reviews on Steam, but not too many reviews at the time of writing. Dark Thar on Steam wrote a very lengthy and detailed review. They spent about 6 hours with the game, which apparently is more than enough to be able to finish it. It's only about 3 hours long. Here's what they said, quote, Neon Blood left me with a bittersweet taste. Despite its potential to be an outstanding investigative game with a deep narrative, well-developed plots and strategic combat, the final product is disappointing. Unfortunately, all these aspects lack depth and proper execution. The game shines brightest in its visual presentation. The art direction, atmosphere, and soundtrack are all absolutely phenomenal. Every frame during gameplay, it feels like it could be turned into wallpaper, even something as mundane as a trash can. However, at the end of the day, Neon Blood is just that, a visually stunning game with little substance beneath its surface, end quote. Here's a game that's clearly all substance, Trombone Champ, Unflattened. This is the VR version of the viral rhythm game from back in 2022, and now it's out on all VR platforms, including PSVR, Quest, and Steam, and it seems to have done pretty well for itself. A strong OpenCritic score of 78 and an overall positive rating on Steam. Here's a review from Scum on Steam, quote, this is easily one of the most polished VR titles I've played. It just feels incredible to play. The game has carved out an identity of its own. It could have been just another cheap VR port, but you can clearly see the thought and care that went into crafting every detail, end quote. Okay, time to move on to the biggest release of the week, Infinity Nikki, the open world dress-up gacha game led by a Zelda designer and with 36 million registrations. Well, wouldn't you know it, the gacha dress-up game is getting some pretty positive reviews. The game's not out yet at the time of writing, but early reviews for the PC version is sitting at 78 on Metacritic. Eurogamer gave this one 4 out of 5 stars while noting that its gacha systems don't seem to be required to at all progress the main storyline content. Here's what they had to say, quote, of course, even though Infinity Nikki's gacha system is more or less redundant in terms of gameplay benefits, if the inclusion of one full stop is a deal breaker for you, then Infinity Nikki won't do anything different to change your mind here. Personally, I think this is a shame, as the rest of the game feels like a breath of fresh air for the genre. The changes in length, combat, and the progression all feel utterly invigorating compared to other Genshin-likes, and it's why Infinity Nikki feels like it could and should be on the same trajectory to shake up the gacha scene, just like Genshin Impact did in 2020, end quote. High praise, which is echoed in very similar ways by PC Gamer and DualShockers at this stage, but as always, do go into these games with full knowledge of the business model and stay well away if you think you could be at all affected, because yeah, these games know how to get you. So what's coming out this week? Quite a few big games this week to cap off the year, and the first and biggest in every sense of the word is Path of Exile 2. This is the very highly anticipated ARPG from New Zealand's Grinding Gear Games, and can I just say it's kind of weird to see some sort of conspiracy in the comment section suggesting that I'm deliberately not talking about this game or something. Like, where the fuck did that come from? I've spoken about this game plenty of times. I've talked about it in the podcast. I've talked about it on this show. It's a game I've personally been really looking forward to for literally years, because I've always heard so many good things about PoE 1, but then I heard they were making a 2. And so I was like, oh, well, I'll just wait for that then. Like 3 years of delays later, it's arriving on Friday for all platforms bar Switch. Full disclosure though, I will not have time to review this one anytime soon, because right after it launches, I have to get on a plane to go to LA for the Game Awards, plus I have other content lined up in December. I will be playing it though, but to properly review a game of such mammoth scale, it takes time, and it's the kind of time I just don't have in December, unfortunately. So if you don't see a video from me, that's why. It's not because of the conspiracy, it's because I'm busy. Anyway, TLDR, PoE 2 is looking amazing. We're all gonna play it, and it's gonna be sick. It's out on Friday. The next big release is Marvel Rivals, NetEase's team-based hero shooter that asks, what if Marvel was anime and everything was exploding all the time? This one's coming out on all platforms bar Switch on the same day as Path of Exile. Good luck with that. And if the open beta was any indication, this one is going to be really popular. Always going to be a tough job to enter into an already overstuffed genre, but I think if you can throw big licenses and shitloads of money at the problem, then that often helps. Plus, the game itself is actually pretty damn good, so that doesn't hurt either. I did a pretty deep dive impressions video for this one, and I don't expect it to have have much more to say at launch. So similar to Concord, we're actually going to get Austin to do the review for this one, so you get a bit of a different perspective. Look forward to that review dropping next week, or just be sure to subscribe and ding the notification bell, that way you won't miss it. The third big release for the week is Todd Howard's Baby, the game he willed into existence and executive produced. No, it's not the Elder Scrolls 6, because it's not the year 2030. No, I'm talking about Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Bethesda have been trying their best to drum up some excitement for this one, but they seem to be struggling, as various cinematic and gameplay trailers have left people feeling a little whelmed. Previews for this one were net positive, but no one was really jumping out of their chair ready to declare it a banger in the making. Also interesting to note that reviews for this one drop at the exact same moment that it's released into early access. So it's a good thing that it's on Game Pass, making it very easy to check out no matter which way those reviews land. Hopefully you checked out Rogue Flight from the Put This On Your Radar segment a few weeks back, which was looking to capture the vibes of early 90s Robotech in an arcade flight game. It's a good thing they got out early, because the real deal is coming on December 6th. Macross Shooting Insight. It's a bullet hell based on the anime of the same name, already out in Japan, but this one is the English release and it's hitting PC, Switch, and the PlayStation consoles. Reviews for it make special note of its high degree of difficulty, so definitely geared towards that hardcore shump market. Thursday, December 10th is a big day. It starts off with the port of Resident Evil 2 Remake on Mac and iOS. iPhones and Mac have had no difficulty handling any of the other RE games, so this one shouldn't be any different. Also on the 10th is a day I never thought we'd see. Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver 1 and 2 Remastered arrive for all platforms. Now look, as I've said many times before, these games have not aged well in their mechanics. Combat, traversal, puzzles, camera, anything. But if you haven't experienced the Shakespearean-inspired melodrama and monologuing before, then you are in for one hell of a treat. Written by the legendary Amy Hennig of Uncharted fame, these games are just straight up poetry at times, and the voice performances are all-timers, and the world building is sick. It's just super good shit, so please buy it. So the suits upstairs get the KPIs they want in order to greenlight a proper sequel, okay? The world needs Ben Starr voicing Raziel in an all-new Legacy of Kain game. So this is step one, don't let me down. Also releasing on December 10th is Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Reader's Rewind, which is an all-new modern retro beat-em-up for 4 players made by the folks at Digital Eclipse, who are most known for their preservation work. This one is based on the 1990s run of Power Rangers, so it's scientifically designed to be a big nostalgia hit for anyone who watched that show, and honestly it looks pretty damn good. This one's coming to all platforms, although the Switch version will be delayed until December 19th. The last one for December 10th is the long-awaited Monument Valley 3. The first 2 Monument Valley games were excellent and beautiful puzzle games. So good, in fact, that Netflix bought the rights to distribute this one exclusively through its game service. So if you want to play it, you have to have Netflix. There you go, that's where we're at now in 2024. And the very last release for the coming week is Shiren the Wanderer, the Mystery Dungeon of Serpent Coil Island. Released earlier this year on the Switch, it now arrives on Steam on December 11th. Remember how we said last week that they were releasing it in winter? Well, it turns out that was just next week. Probably should have just said that, would have been a little bit easier. Okay, so we've kind of had this one in the corner of our eye, and since it launched last week, it's gotten quite a bit of buzz, so put this on your radar. This is Enigma of Fear, a Brazilian-made mystery game that looks like a survival horror game at first glance, but it's actually more of a detective and investigation game where you investigate the occult. Now, I love a good detective game, but it's often hard to get a gauge about how intricate all this stuff is until you get into it for yourself. But when people compare it to Outer Wilds and Tunic in their Steam reviews, that's certainly enough to get me paying attention. So yeah, there's a lot of self-led and non-linear investigation, clue hunting, and world unraveling to be done in this one, some light combat and stealth, plus a really interesting mix of 2D sprites and 3D environments and puzzles. Also, you have a dog. So if you like the look of this one, want to pick it up, or maybe even just wish-list it, then we've left a link to it over on our Steam Curator page, which also has links to all of the other Put This On Your Radar stuff we've recently covered. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Sort of free stuff time now, and on the Epic Store, you can still grab the arena shooter roguelike Brotato until Friday, at which point it'll be replaced by 2 bangers. The first is Bus Simulator 21, and yes, that is a real game. The second is actually incredible. Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. which tells the story of all 9 mainline Star Wars films in a genuinely incredible package, featuring shitloads of characters and planets and vehicles and set pieces, and honestly, like, it's pretty wild. Like, yeah, please play it. You will be blown away by how much shit is in this game. It's crazy. Xbox has announced the game's coming to Game Pass in December and into the start of January, and it's led by Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled, which should already be out by the time you're hearing this. Joining it are racing sim EA Sports WRC and cozy city builder Overthrown. And of course, next week there's Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, that's launching day and date. Roguelike deck builder Wild Frost is the latest edition announced for December, and in early January we're getting Devolver's horrific side-scroller Carry On and a branching narrative game called Road 96. A few games trickling down to the entry-level tiers of Game Pass too. Forza Motorsport, Haunty, and Humanity have made their way to the standard tier, with Daisy and Goat Simulator now being part of the core catalog. Also of note, Forza Horizon 4 is leaving Game Pass and the store forever in just a couple of weeks' time on December 15th because of the whole bullshit life cycle of vehicle and music licensing thing, so definitely pick that up if you have any interest in it before it's gone forever. It's a good time, fanging around the UK in a Mini Cooper or whatever else takes your fancy. Over on PlayStation Plus, they've announced their essential games for December, which include co-op adventure game It Takes Two, co-op shooting game Aliens Dark Descent, and some creature collecting action with Temtem. For premium subscribers, they've also added 4 new games to the classic lineup, including Sly 2, Band of Thieves, Sly 3, Honor Among Thieves, and Jak and Daxter, the Precursor's Legacy. Over on Nintendo Switch Online, they didn't end up announcing Donkey Kong Island 3, at least not at the time of writing, but they did announce 3 new Mega Drive Genesis games out now, which include Toe Jam and Earl in Panic on Funkotron, Vector Man, and Wolf of the Battlefield Mercs. Look, I assume these are all real games, but they really do sound like they got an AI to make up some fake 90s game names, I swear to God. Wait, hold the presses, breaking news. Nintendo, literally, as we were finalizing the last part of this script, they just announced that Donkey Kong Land 3 is now available for the Nintendo Switch Online. Why couldn't you have just done this all at the same time? This makes absolutely no sense. In addition, Nintendo have announced that the NES version of Tetris, which is the gold standard version still used in competitive Tetris today, even though it hasn't been officially re-released since the original launch, that is coming to Switch Online on December 12th. Some big additions to Apple Arcade this month, which really felt worth mentioning. On December 9th, they're adding Final Fantasy IV 3D Remake and Final Fantasy IV The After Years. Now, this is a complete remake of Final Fantasy IV on the SNES and a canonical sequel to it, which were originally made for the Nintendo DS and PSP and were later ported to mobile. These are very good games, so if you're a JRPG fan and you haven't played these, then, you know, that's a pretty good deal. Moving on to Prime Gaming, and folks, they have done it again. There is a lot of good shit here this month. Available right now, you can grab Star Wars Bounty Hunter Remastered, which only came out like 2 months ago, Tomb Raider Underworld, the excellent Call of Juarez, Gunslinger, Quake, and one of 2023's most awarded indies, Dredge, all DRM-free gold codes. There are a couple of good ones still to come on the horizon, like Planet of Lana and Predator Hunting Grounds, but we'll give you a heads up when they get closer to release. Our feel-good story for the week comes with a very big not safe for work disclaimer. So if you're listening to this in the office, over speakers or whatever, first of all, what the fuck are you doing? Please be more considerate of your co-workers. And secondly, you may want to pop in some earbuds. So Helldivers is a big deal, still doing big numbers all these months later, a genuine Game of the Year contender, or maybe it would have been had DLC been excluded by the rule set, but that's a topic for another video. Anyway, we've spoken a lot about knockoffs this video, that 10-cent game ripping off Horizon, Power World going all in on Pokemon. Well, a studio by the name of Octo Games found themselves very inspired by Helldivers, only they didn't try to convert it into a survival crafting game. They just thought they'd slam some porn in there and call it a day. Take a look at just some of the trailer.
Become the hero. Epic missions.
This is Sex Divers, and yes, the absolute mad lads really had the balls to call it Sex Divers. It is a game where you do helldiver shit by day, cape and all, and as word of your exploits grow, you get more and more baddies propositioning you back at the capital ship at night. To quote the box art, quote, "With each successful mission, your fame grows, and so does your popularity among the women in the expedition and beyond. The more achievements you unlock, the more erotic possibilities become available, turning your journey into something far more than just a fight for survival," end quote. So there you have it. Sex Divers is a real thing. Just make sure you don't misspell anything on your Christmas list. Otherwise, your mum is going to be in for a very rude shock when she starts doing some Googling on your behalf. Your dad, though, he probably won't mind. Alright, ladies and gents, that is the show done. Thanks for being rad. Always appreciate you stopping by. Would extra appreciate it if you could hit the like button on the video, subscribe if you haven't yet, and ding that notification bell. Look forward to Indiana Jones and Marvel Rivals reviews going up in the channel over the next week. Don't play too much PoE 2. Remember to go outside from time to time. A big thanks for watching, and a very special thanks to this week's sponsor, Lost in Cult. So you might have seen last month we partnered up with this video sponsor, Lost in Cult, to profile some of what they do. If you haven't heard of them before, they specialize in making beautifully crafted collections of books, music, and memorabilia, all of it celebrating the rich history of video games. I'd earlier bought their Sable book because I love Sable, and the chance to have that art on my coffee table, I just couldn't turn that down. Last month they announced their most requested project ever, a richly detailed and beautifully presented book looking back at Outer Wilds, my favorite game of all time, and I think one of the most important games ever made. Well, Lost in Cult aren't slowing down, and just this month they announced 2 new offerings. The first is Make Us Whole, The History of Dead Space. It's a 270-page book by author Elijah Beam, and it's the definitive history of one of the best and most influential survival horror games ever made. Make Us Whole features incisive prose, new and candid interviews with the franchise creators, and hands-on insight into pre-release prototypes, all paired with masterful illustrations by Jonathan Lamantia. This oral history book explores the vast reaches of the Dead Space universe, from its games to its books, movies, and comics and beyond. It comes in either a standard edition or a pre-order exclusive signed edition. That pre-order window is only available until the end of December though. The other thing that Lost in Cult are putting out is pretty extraordinary. You might have heard of Enhance. It's the Japanese studio led by Tetsuya Mitsuguchi, and over the past decade they've delivered all-timers like Res Infinite, Tetris Effect Connected, Lumens Remastered, and Humanity. This year marks the 10-year anniversary of that studio, and to celebrate, Lost in Cult has compiled the Enhanced Collection, available in 2 highly limited box sets. The Enhanced Soundworks Collection box set is essentially a collection of vinyls. It's limited to just 505 copies, and it features a total of 9 LP vinyls with dozens of iconic tracks, as well as extra goodies including a turntable slit mat, all featured in a beautifully presented box. The Enhanced at 10 box set is limited to just 1,010 copies, and it features a compilation CD celebrating Enhance's discography, as well as a 300-page oral history book recounting how the studio came to be and how the most important people in that story view its unfolding legacy. The pre-order campaign for both these box sets closes on December 10th. They are strictly limited, and honestly, the timing couldn't be any better. With the holidays just around the corner, these sorts of collector's items are perfect gifts because they're special and rare and intimate. The perfect gift for nerds like us who know what this sort of stuff is and really value it. If you'd like to grab either the Dead Space book or the Enhanced Collection, I've left links to both of them below the like button, and don't forget to use offer code SKILLUP at checkout for 5% off your order. Thanks Lost in Cult for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.